Yesterday, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth made headlines when discussing the war in Ukraine by saying that a return to pre-2014 boundaries was an unrealistic objective. This has been completely obvious for years to anyone who's been following the war closely and not just getting occasional dishonest soundbites from politicians. But the truth is, a return to pre-2022 boundaries is probably just as unrealistic. And what makes that especially tragic for the people of Ukraine is that there was an opportunity to bring that about years ago. And this is obviously the case considering where things stand now. That opportunity wasn't taken. Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine almost exactly 3 years ago, on February 24th, 2022. Days later, Ukraine's President Zelensky attempted to set up indirect talks with Russia's President, Putin. He called then-Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and asked him to contact Putin and serve as a mediator. Bennett agreed. Over the next week, Bennett had a series of phone calls with Putin before traveling to Moscow and Berlin to help organize diplomatic communication channels. His effort culminated in a meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian foreign ministers in Turkey that March. The two sides were talking and making concessions, according to Bennett, but Ukraine's Western backers were resistant. At a NATO summit that month, the alliance decided not to support anything coming out of the peace negotiations. Still, the Ukrainian and Russian officials kept at it, and, at the end of March, they reached a deal. According to a draft that was unsealed in 2023 and negotiators from both sides, Russia had agreed to pull its forces back to pre-invasion boundaries, and, in exchange, Ukraine agreed it would not seek NATO membership. Russian officials claim that their major withdrawal from northern Ukraine, around the capital of Kiev at the beginning of April, was them beginning to abide by the Istanbul Agreement, and the timeline certainly matches up. But then, according to Bennett, the leader of the Ukrainian delegation, and both the Turkish foreign minister and German chancellor who were present, the heads of Western governments pressured Zelensky to abandon the agreement, walk away from the talks, and fight. Assuming the best of intentions, it is possible that Western officials thought that Ukraine could win enough battles to improve their leverage in future negotiations. But that's not what happened. First, in the fall of 2022, Russia laid permanent claim to tens of thousands of square miles that they had earlier agreed to pull out of during the talks. An opportunity for a deal only a little worse than the Istanbul Agreement was missed in late 2022, after Ukraine recaptured some cities, because, we were told, there would be a massive counteroffensive the following summer. But when that counteroffensive happened, the Ukrainians lost more territory than they gained. Since then, Ukraine's position in future negotiations has only grown weaker as its supply of soldiers dwindles. The incursion last summer into Russia didn't change this dynamic. It is tragic that the opportunity to end the war with Russia pulling out of all the territory they've taken since 2022 was missed. But the inescapable fact is that the longer it takes for both sides to return to the table, the worse things get for Ukraine.